Hello, everyone. In this segment of the lecture, I'm going to discuss the negative aspect of globalization. But then again, we may have to think in this COVID-19 pandemic period how globalization is faring, how the interconnectedness, that is the main concept of globalization, is working, whether it is at all working because all the borders are closed and people are restrained from traveling. So it would be quite interesting to see what would be the aftermath or the post COVID 19 and the process of globalization work. So there are negative aspects of globalization. Globalization can disrupt kinship, social, and political relationships. For example, media can manipulate people's preference. It constantly forces a consumer oriented culture, for example, Levi jeans and Nike, the American brands, against the traditional items, for example, the sari and the Bata shoes, the Bangladeshi products. Critics say people, for example, Bangladeshi and Indians working for overseas companies, are losing their ethnic languages because English is becoming a global language. Globalization can cause hopelessness and people's misery. For example, there are radical sites of Al Qaeda or the Islamic States, the ISIS in the internet, the social media. They both justify their ideology of extreme violence. These sites can generally indoctrinate young people globally. The white supremacist sites are the major radical hate sites, and they can also indoctrinate the young white mainstream Americans or the British. Inequality is an outcome of globalization. The wealthiest nations have grown to be more wealthier. The wealthiest nations, North America, Western Europe, and East Asia, compared to the other nations, they are growing wealthier at the cost of the hard labor of the working class in the developing countries. Some transnational corporations, such as the World Bank or International Monetary Funds, rely on private investment. So there is a pressure for the developing countries to create positive investment climate. So the investment climate pressures the national government to restructure their national economies, such as deregulation, lower corporate taxes, and less protection of domestic industries. Globalization puts people at the mercy of other types of power. It does not guarantee freedom of individuals. Again, when it comes to inequality, the anti globalist claims that globalization is not working for the majority of the world. From 1960 to 1998, inequality worsened both internationally and within countries. The United Nations Development Programme reported that the richest 20% of the world's population consume 86% of the world resources, while the poorest 80% consume only 14%. Allegations and stereotypes. Critics in the United States say that their products made overseas in countries such as China would put their technologies at risk of being copied or stolen. Exploitation is the outcome of globalization. Prisoners and child workers are used to work in inhuman conditions. Safety standards are ignored to produce cheap goods. There is also an increase in human trafficking. There are health issues. Some experts say that globalization is leading to communicable diseases. Deadly diseases like HIV/AIDS are being traveled by travelers to the remotest corners of the world. And now, as I speak, in August 2020, the entire world is facing the pandemic. They're going through COVID-19, and the transmission, the transmission through human beings is very likely in this pandemic. Environmental hazards in the globalization era, people living in the developing countries suffer in the environmental context. For example, in exchange for jobs, they get toxic chemicals in their air and water. Hence, it affects their farmland. It also leads to unhealthy food products. Globalization leads to cross cultural management or inequality or health issues. So, for example, the first food restaurants like McDonald's is cheap, it's convenient, and then it is available in many countries of the world. So, people they prefer to buy fast foods because it is relatively cheaper and quicker than other restaurant foods. This replaces home cooked food. Fast food contains a lot of fat, sugar, salt, resulting a global epidemic of diabetes, obesity, and other chronic diseases. So there are many fast food restaurants in America, in Britain, or elsewhere in the world, including India and Bangladesh, and that can lead to health issues. There is job insecurity in the developed countries, such as the United States. So, globalization is deindustrializing America as it has outsourced its manufacturing blue collar and white collar jobs. Supporters of globalization in the USA have made the case that it is good because it has brought low priced imported goods. Then comes the question of unemployment in the developed countries. Most people, such as accountants, programmers, editors, and scientists, have lost jobs due to the outsourcing to cheaper locations, such as India. The globalization had a great consequence in Bangladesh. Through globalization, the job markets have opened in the developing countries. So globalization has led to exploitation of labor. Safety standards are ignored to produce cheap goods. For example, the Bangladeshi garments case in 2013. In June 2013, a cracked garment building in Bangladesh collapsed, killing 1,127 people. The garment industry is a 20 billion a year money generator for Bangladesh. Some 4,500 factories employ 3.5 million workers, and that accounts for 77% of the country's export. There hasn't been any safety measures or insurance for the workers. The minimum wage of the workers is the equivalent of $38 a month. So the workers continue to work, and the government or the company's owner have ignored the issues of disparity. In Britain, Brexit is another concern for the British people. More than specific concerns of the British people about the European Union, the vote highlighted growing worldwide anxiety over the impact of globalization. a segment of the public in Europe and the United States seem united by their common concerns over integration. Brexit is anxious about globalization and increased trade, immigration, perceived threat of job losses, and impact on their sovereignty when the nations sign treaties or join economic blocs. Most importantly, globalization is the deeper issue of each individual's sense of identity and their place in the world. On 12th April 2019, it was supposed to be a day that Britain left the European Union, but the planned exit has been delayed. While some of those who did not wish to leave the European Union hoped and delay buys them time, many Brexit supporters feel differently. So there is division of opinion, diverse opinion on the Brexit issue, whether Britain would stay isolated or prefer to stay isolated, or whether it will be a group within the European Union. Capitalism and global markets, illiberalism, nationalism, and authoritarianism are on the rise, as well as populism in the West is on the rise. There is instability in the Middle East and North Korea. There are issues of Islamic fundamentalism. And again, there is the new issue of Brexit and President Donald Trump of United States almost making news frequently on issues of globalization, trade, and so on. Europe needs to unite around its social market model and more strongly project its values in the world. President Trump was elected in the United States on a clearly protectionist platform, and while Brexit is much more complicated, it is also against integration. In Brussels, the European Union, people worry about the divisions in the Europe. Europe needs to unite more on security policy. It needs to give a better impression on managing its external borders. That is the opinion of some European policymakers. So, yes, Brexit is a short term of British exit. It is United Kingdom's decision whether it will leave the European Union or it would prefer to stay with the European Union. So that is the call of the British people. As I mentioned earlier, that the group of eight, G8, refers to a group of eight highly industrialized nations: France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Russia, and Japan. G8 holds meetings annually to discuss global issues such as economic growth and crisis management, global security, energy, and terrorism. Globalization can lead to water pollution, soil pollution, and greenhouse effect, as it is indicated in this image of the lecture. Again, this image shows the negative effects. Developed nations have outsourced. There is exploitation of labor. There is job insecurity. There's sophisticated weapons enhancing their ability. There are bad aspects of foreign culture that can blend easily with the other cultures. There are fear that the local cultures or the language is being undermined through globalization. And so these are some of the concerns, and sometimes the governments inability to look into the grievances of the people can be an effect of from globalization. So this image is a very good example of exploitation where the women in the developing countries are making shoes, Nike, and the profit will eventually be made in the developed countries, developed Western countries. This image shows the vicious circle of globalization, and here people are having rallies and protest against globalization and the profit the corporates are making, the financials are making. But then again, it shows that people cannot do away, cannot stop eating from the fast food restaurants. And so that is the irony of globalization. This image is a very good example of outsourcing and stereotype. And there is this shirt. It's written made in Bangladesh and it is being sold in one of the Western countries, the Walmart, which is in the United States. That's the written in this. That's the name written in this image, and so perhaps the meaning is of this image is the made in Bangladesh um, t-shirt is being sold at a cheaper rate in the Western countries, in the Western departmental stores. But then again, it is at the cost of a hard labor of the working class in the developing countries. So the caption says our pre washed jeans are a bargain, but our pre soaked in blood t shirts are an absolute steal. So this is a sad reminder how people in the developing countries are exploited with their labor. But then again, there are people in the developed countries, the G summit people, the they have their the G8 summit, the eight um, G summit countries, the rich countries, they have their conferences. But then again, there are people in the Western countries who are the anti-globalization group. So they are anti G8 summit group, and they hold rallies in and protests outside the venue of the G8 summit place. And so this poster shows 1127 dead in Bangladesh. So there are people in the West who are anti globalization, who are the group, they speak against globalization, and they want to end globalization, and they speak for the minorities, the people of the developing countries who are working day and night with their hard labor, who are paid less, and who do not have their health security, who do not have insurance, who are not paid compensation when there is a health issue. So, but there are people in the West who, from the developed nations, who are supporting the minorities and speaking against exploitation. Now, this is the time of COVID-19. Unfortunately, it's a worldwide pandemic where this disease can spread through human contact. There is this scare of contamination, and that's why there has been lockdown and restrictions globally to restrict the spread of COVID-19. So now, in these circumstances, we need to think, how does globalization matter in this situation, or how would it affect globalization? Because we know globalization is interconnectedness. If we think of the positive side, it is interconnectedness. It has made the world into a it has turned the world into a global village, and people are interacting. There is People are learning other people's culture. So it doesn't feel that separatedness. It feels a very cohesive global world. So the other day I was in the HMN shop, which is a clothing store, and this the HMN, I found it very popular in the United States. So perhaps it is um, the main head office is in the United States. So they have opened a branch in the Randall Mall in Adelaide, where we live in South Australia. So uh, I went to buy some clothings, ladies' clothings, and then there I found a pant. A trouser, and a shirt, and that was 100% cotton, and that was made in Bangladesh. So there you go, that's globalization. um, I'm in Adelaide in South Australia, and when I am in a big clothing store, a very popular one, H&M, and I get to buy the clothing which is made in Bangladesh, which is a good feeling, because I think, I'm buying something from my country, product made from my country of origin. So globalization, as I said, it's the transportation of the products, and it is very accessible, getting things from different parts of the world. So in this image, this is me, which I'm wearing the gloves and the mask, because we were traveling to Australia, back to Australia. So we are Australian Bangladeshi citizens. So we were in the special flight in the COVID-19 period. Uh, my husband and I, we traveled back to Australia. So this has been possible because of the globalization. There was this aeroplane available, a special flight, and we could fly back to our family, because our family, they live in Australia. So that is interconnectedness. That is the swift thing can happen in a short period of time. We can move from one place to another. That's the positive side of globalization. Finally, the globalization has positive and negative aspects. Then again, globalization has made the virtual teaching possible. So world is still interconnected, uh, through the social media, through the online teaching. So in this image, it's me who is taking the summer semester, the teaching this teaching the students from Australia to Bangladesh. I'm a professor of history in the BRAC University in Dhaka, Bangladesh, but the work is still going, teaching and learning is still going, and so the interconnectedness is still happening, but in a virtual manner, I guess. So that's about it for today. Thank you.